Hi, I'm Carys
And I'm Kimberly McIntosh, and you're listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar.
A weekly look at the stories in the news that are being overreported and the ones going completely under the radar and not being talked about enough. My co-host this week is writer, policy expert, and the author of Black Girl No Magic, Kimberly McIntosh. I'm also one of my favourite people on TikTok. Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for doing the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I listen to this podcast and I am a Patreon supporter. So it's very exciting to be here today.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got a Patreon
Hell yeah.
now. Thank you. Very exciting. Yeah, I feel like you're one of those people that I've followed on social media for a while and read lots of your writing. So I have a parasocial relationship with you. So I can't remember if we've actually met, but I feel like we've met, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think we actually have met once very briefly, because it was a while ago, pre-pandemic, I believe. And Maya Goodfellow, journalist and academic.
Maya Goodfellow is a good friend. Yes. Okay. Is she our mutual?
She's our mutual. She did a drinks for her first book and I went to it and you were there.
Yes. Okay. That rings a bell. Yes. Her first book, Hostile Environment, which is amazing. Maya came and co-hosted the show once. Yes. Okay. So we're in the kind of wonky lefty world together, I would say. Also, I want to talk a little bit about TikTok. Talk to me about your TikTok. I love your TikTok. I feel like you're really good at it, partly probably because you're quite a bit younger than me. What got you into TikTok?
So I got into TikTok initially in the pandemic. I really resisted it for a long time because I heard it was very addictive, which is true. But my flatmate got me to cave and I was on there scrolling away and I never thought I'd make any videos. I thought I'm just here as an observer. But then the more content that I was consuming, I guess I noticed that there was quite a lot of appetite for people to talk about political issues, to talk about social issues in a fun way. And I hope my TikToks are fun.
That is what you do. They are very fun.
Thank you.
They look like you've just turned the camera on and you're just chatting. I don't know if they take a bit more work, but I'm still mostly a lurker on TikTok, but I enjoy your videos.
I would encourage you, just get on it. It's just once you do the first one, it's like...
Okay, rip off the plaster.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe. Okay. Well, Kimberly and I have both taken a look at the news agenda and we've each picked one story that's gone over the top and one that we think has flown under the radar and not been talked about enough. And Kimberly, I think you're going to start us off with your over the top. What's your over the top for the week?
Yes. So my over the top is about women's fertility. Okay, I'm just tired about hearing about women's fertility and I know we're going to get into it, but the reason why I feel like I've seen it so much over the past week is for two reasons.
Yeah.
So one, Matt Goodwin has been saying things. Should I explain Matt Goodwin?
Reform politician. Yeah. I mean, for those who don't know, he's a Reforms candidate in the Gorton and Denton by-election. What else do people know about Matt Goodwin?
So I would call him a disgraced academic.
I feel like disgraced academic was in my head. Yeah. He's an academic who used to write about UKIP and the Brexit Party. And then he became, I don't know if he was in UKIP, but he definitely is in Reform.
Definitely in Reform. He used to be a fellow at Chatham House back in the day. And I used to work at the Runnymede Trust. So in the 2010s, this man was everywhere. He was very active on Twitter, big yapper. And I just felt like he was constantly being talked about, and yapping and not in the good way, not in the good way at all.
We love a good yapper.
We do love a good yapper.
Yapping can be fun, yeah.
But he is now the candidate for Gorton and Denton where Andy Burnham was trying to run and was blocked. And he's got quite a gang supporting his campaign.
So this sort of crew, so Matt Goodwin is the kind of too much immigration, Reform UK, academic who now has a big Substack. What has he got to do with women's fertility? I've missed this. Tell us, what is he saying about women's fertility?
Well, when you run to be a candidate, generally people start going through your backlog to see what you've been saying on Twitter, see if you've got a weird blog going on. And he did have a weird blog. So in 2023, he wrote a blog which was saying that women who don't have children should be taxed more.
Okay.
For one, look, I'm a single woman.
Just walk us through that. What was the core argument of that blog?
So the core argument is that we should be taxing childless people more so that we can try and encourage them to have children.
Because we need more children.
Because we need more children. Because the UK's birth rate has, it's been slowing down for some time. It's very common along in Western Europe. and in the US and also in Japan and also in South Korea. But the way to get people to have children is obviously to create the conditions that makes it easier for people to have children if they want to have them.
Okay, so Matt Goodwin's out here calling for people. Are there other people saying that women should be having more children? Is this like a broader? You said you were over it. Is there more? Is it more than just Matt Goodwin? Tell us.
So we've had Matt Goodwin in the kind of things he's been saying in the past being revealed in the last week. But then the week before that, we had coverage from France, which is about the French government's plans to send letters to all 29-year-olds to kind of warn them about their fertility and to kind of note to them where their nearest egg freezing center is. Yeah.
Okay, this bypassed me. What? Every 29-year-old in France is going to get a letter about fertility and egg freezing.
Yeah, to try and encourage them to start thinking about their fertility in the hope that they will then go on to have more children, in a way to try and tackle the fertility crisis in France.
Okay, so tell us a bit more about this. Why are you over this story?
I think the reason I've been over it for so long is because it's actually been going on since 2021. So there was a census that came out, the most recent census data came out, and it found that more women than ever reached the age of 30 and hadn't even had one child. And this caused a flurry of think pieces and opinion pieces and news coverage, kind of scaremongering about what does this mean and trying to encourage women to have more children, saying it's because they've become too career focused, some blaming the growth of feminism, and none of it really going into the social reasons for why people might not be having children, might be delaying it, might be having less children, which really boils down to unaffordable housing and unaffordable childcare, that being the two main social tenets that stop people from being able to afford children if they want them. But the argument was never there. It was all about how can we change the behavior of certain women, because often this is really, really coded. It's not everyone that they want to encourage to have children.
I see. Yeah. Say more.
So they mean white people. You know, we've got a lot of
white women.
They want more white middle-class women to have children. Like, I don't know what anyone's age is, and I don't reveal mine anymore because people assume I'm younger and I let them run with that.
Okay, but you think it's coded towards white women. You don't think it's actually about all of us having kids. It's not for us to have the babies.
I think when Matt Goodwin is making comments about women's fertility, there was he was also on a podcast that has been uncovered where he was talking about universities becoming too feminized and complaining about feminism and how that was corrupting universities and making them woke. And so we shouldn't see it as separate from his wider ideology. He's been on online platforms talking about how white people are going to become a minority in the future. The comments you referred to about British citizenship as well, and that just having the piece of paper doesn't make you British. So I see it as part of like a wider narrative.
Literally untrue, by the way. Having the piece of paper does make you British. Like, that's why the piece of paper exists. Yeah, okay. So you're over being told that you have to have children. I would also be over getting a letter about my fertility. That feels gross. Yeah, I think it's interesting because it connects to a couple of things, right? It sounds like there's a connection to great replacement theory, which is this like scaremongering thing in Western countries and sort of Western Europe about all the white people are going to be replaced. So this is like a policy solution, we might say, of just like the white people are going to be replaced, have more babies so that the black and brown people don't take over. Is that your read on it?
That's definitely my read on it. If we're worried about, from a social policy perspective, if the birth rate goes down, there are fears for the state around how we're going to pay for people's pensions as they age. We're not going to have enough workers. I would say, well, we could increase immigration to manage so that we have enough workers, and obviously we treat them well with good conditions. But that would be a solution, but that's never the one that they pose. Like,
we could also make childcare more affordable and try and do something about the fact that housing is so expensive, whether you're renting or trying to own a property. That would be another thing, maybe.
Yeah, that would be another thing. There's definitely a link between secure housing and people having children, if they want them.
Okay, so basically it's very focused on the putting it on women.
Yeah, It's all women's
I
responsibility.
wonder why that might be. Okay, this is a good over. I mean, yeah, you're right. The sort of framing of the story ignores a myriad of things that might contribute to women's fertility. Also, just the sense that, like, if men, like, and not to sound like a feminist, sorry, Matt Goodwin, but also this idea that, like, women's bodies and choices for their lives are somehow sort of fair play for policymakers. Like, the French letter sounds pretty wild. Why are men not getting that letter?
So in theory, everyone gets it.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. It's not okay. Everyone at 29 gets a letter being like, think about your fertility and egg freezing.
Yeah. So in practice, we know who it's really directed to, but they do send it to everyone. So they've got that cover that they're not just targeting women, but ultimately that is who it's directed at.
If you could send everyone a letter at 29, would the thing you picked really be their fertility? So wild.
I know, of all the big decisions you want to be thinking about at that age, like from the state.
I don't want to be boring, but my mum has been talking about my pension for a long time. And I do kind of wish I'd listened to her a bit younger than I am now. I'd say pensions could be one.
Pensions should definitely
I just
be
think
one.
there's other stuff you could write about that would be more valuable to society and the world. Okay, so I mean, what do we think? Is this about the connection between sort of far-right anti-migrant individuals and parties and movements and just the fact that they're all sort of misogynist and like not feminist? Or do you think this is like a bigger thing that goes beyond just the Matt Goodwins of the world?
I think they're all connected. I mean, we know that there's also an element of the far-right ideology that wants women's rights to be reversed. And we're seeing that if we look to the US, I'm a bit loath to always do the comparison, but the kind of restriction of abortion rights, it can't really be separated from the idea of what you want, the image of what you want the nation to be, and trying to revert the progress of women's rights to some kind of like mythic 1940s, 1950s past of a white female housewife and a man, with loads of kids, and a man with his rightful place in the workplace. I don't think it can be separated.
Yeah. And I guess it's also just, I think the thing that's hard for me is like, what if women don't want to have as many kids and like maybe that's okay?
Yeah, maybe that's fine.
Because it's not really, it's like, oh, this is a problem to be solved. How can we get people to have more kids? Or people could just not have kids if they didn't want to. Like, I don't think I mean, it's also weird because it feels like the same people who are saying that like the country is full and there's no room for anyone to come in are then also saying that like women need to have more kids. And I just like, that doesn't seem to make sense unless, as you say, you view it through a racial lens, in which case it's like white women have more children. And white women, if you're listening, you should not have more children unless you want to.
Only if you want to.
Or any children. If you want to. Your body, your choice. Again, not to sound like a feminist, think could just be up to you. And if we were like, as a state or as a French state, if we were nudging people towards different decisions, really feels like the number of babies they have should not be the core thing we're focused on, you know?
Definitely not. I mean, definitely the pension thing.
My over the top is, so it's just been, there's so much about this and I almost didn't bring it up because it's like a few days old now and it's kind of receding from the news agenda. So I was like, do I really want to talk about it again? My over the top is Sir Jim Ratcliffe, part owner of Manchester United Football Club, chief executive of chemical company Ineos, who very famously, notoriously, a few days ago now, I think it'll be about a week when this podcast comes out, gave an interview in which he said that there were too many immigrants in the UK. Specifically, the quote that sort of got a lot of attention was that Britain had been colonized by immigrants. He cited some population data, which was just incorrect. He was on Sky News. He said population of the UK was 58 million in 2020, and now it's 70 million. That's 12 million new people. So fact check for Jim, like, that's not true. The population for the UK is like 69.4 million. It was 66.7 million in mid-2020. So just like factually and basically, he did inflate the population growth from about 3 million to 12 million. So that was a lie. He also used the interesting choice of the word colonize, which I'm sure we'll get into. But ultimately, he did a racism. He got loads of coverage for the racism. And then there was more coverage when he sort of apologized by saying, like, I'm sorry if you were offended by my choice of language. And then, various politicians condemned him, and Man United condemned him because, he part owns a football club that's very much reliant on immigration. So it was all a big hoo-ha. There was loads of news coverage. The reason I think it goes over the top, aside from the fact that I don't think that every time a billionaire mouths off about something, they should get blanket news coverage, least of all a billionaire who is not resident in the UK. So Jim Ratcliffe was born in the UK. He grew up in Manchester. But as soon as he made a lot of money, he moved first to Switzerland and then to Monaco because he's a tax dodger. So he doesn't even live here, and he's got opinions about the UK. I think the main things that I think went over the top and were missed by the coverage, there's sort of two things for me. First of all, the core plank of this guy's argument is, we're full, we're spending too much on welfare, we're spending too much on immigrants, if you sort of look at the detail of his comments. Meanwhile, INEOS, big chemical company, chemicals are used for loads of things, making plastics. Obviously, it's quite a carbon intensive industry, but he has this big global chemical company, which relies so much on state funding. In the last 4 years, the government has granted, that's right, it's not a loan, it's a grant, £120 million to save one of its plants. So that's when you just look at the money that Jim got from the UK government. He's also had subsidies from a number of other European governments, France, Germany. He was a Brexiteer, but he very much benefited from European Union funding. So I think the first thing that I'm annoyed about is that his hypocrisy wasn't highlighted. This is a man who takes a lot from our state and doesn't even live here. The second thing to say is, if you do a little bit of digging, which I did, so that you don't have to, Jim Ratcliffe is definitely on a bit of a journey. So his company's not doing well. He's got loads of debt that needs to be serviced. Anyone who's been following INEOS for the last few years would know that. What you might not know is that just before Christmas, he met Nigel Farage, a man who has been very openly courting Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He talks about it on a podcast. We can link to it. He gives an interview to the Times about his business, and he talks about he's got, lunch scheduled with Nigel Farage. So if you do a little bit of digging into Jim Ratcliffe, he has a political position, which is that tax is too high, crime is too high, and immigration is too high. In fact, part of his political philosophy is that you need to look after the 1%. I am directly quoting Jim Ratcliffe there. He believes that taxes are too high. He was taxed too much. That's why he left the UK. He talked about being kicked out of the UK by taxation. It's not quite how taxation works. But yeah, Jim Ratcliffe's mad right wing. He's been courted by Nigel Farage. I cynically think that he has used the fact that he has a media profile to bang the right-wing drums of anti-immigrant sentiment. So I'm kind of over just quoting this old racist opinions without any qualifiers. But tell me what you think, Kimberly. Did you know that stuff about Jim? Did you agree with Jim? Where are you coming from on this?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the story all over the shop. It was everywhere. And I definitely agree it's an over the top. But I didn't know any of those things about him until you said them. And I do find that really interesting and makes me think about, how stories about race and racism are covered more broadly by the media. You have this kind of flashpoint moment, normally someone with a big platform, someone who's seen as important in society for some reason. And unfortunately, being a billionaire is seen as being important in British society. I'm not understating that Man United is important to a lot of people in the UK and abroad.
It is. It is important to a lot of people. Yeah.
Not me personally, but to a lot of people.
No, same. But we respect your life choices.
Yeah, we do. But jokes aside, it says a lot about, the way that the media covers incidents of race and racism. Someone says something racist, there's a huge hoo-ha, it's covered everywhere. Then you get the obligatory mainstream politicians calling it out, saying it was wrong, this isn't what our country is about, even though it's frequently shown that this is endemic in British society and very much a staple of our country, unfortunately, whether we want to face that or not. And then some weak apology comes after that feels very, very insincere. And then the news cycle moves on. And what we don't get is any kind of deeper analysis about why racism is so endemic in the country, but also anything to do with who these people actually are and what their MO might be. He has an agenda, which you've just outlined, right? But I didn't know anything about that from anything I saw.
You're right. For people who are thinking about voting for reform, are concerned about immigration, or even just don't pay that much attention to politics, what actually gets through? What gets through is a really rich and powerful man who owns a big football club says there's too much immigration. So like that, we're just reinforcing wholesale, even though he literally just gave the wrong numbers about population, something that's not true, and like reinforcing in people's heads immigration is too high. This rich and powerful, important person thinks so too. And then you're right, the faux outrage from people who like about, a few days previously will be doing everything they can to sort of like codedly agree that immigrate, like Keir Starmer, he of the "we're living on an island of strangers" speech, a prime minister who gave a speech with like a callback to Enoch Powell, then gets on his high horse of this isn't what this country's about. It's like one of your ministers was on TV after the Tommy Robinson protest saying that, it was about free speech and what a good day for free speech. So it's just like that hypocrisy, I think, is very apparent to us. And I wonder how many other people it's apparent to, just like why is what Jim Ratcliffe said over some invisible line, but all the stuff you spout every day is okay? Like it's part of a continuum. And then I think, the other thing about agendas is if you look at left-wing figures in the UK, or climate activists or Palestine activists, the amount of scrutiny they get from the tabloid press. Zach Polanski is a good example. He's leader of the Green Party. He's quite a high-profile politician now. And there's constantly like, are you a vegan? Do you fly? Like this constant picking apart of everything about his life. What did you do? Meanwhile, Jim Ratcliffe, a man who has made huge amounts of money and like is personally incredibly wealthy. I imagine there is no way for him to not die a rich man, even if he spent, thousands of pounds every day. Like he's one of the richest people in the UK, although he doesn't live here. Like we don't interrogate his politics. We don't dig into his company's practices. Like, why is he talking about handouts and we can't afford to give money out when he is constantly asking for money from the British state? Like maybe we can't afford to prop up Ineos for like 500 jobs was the number in the government press release from the bailout. We saved 500 jobs. And it's like, at what point should you not just pay someone a universal basic income rather than have them like working at Jim Ineos's like chemical factory? So I think there's a couple of things that feel the lack of interrogation of rich people and like how they made their money, I think also really annoys me. But you need to look after the 1%. Like that is, how didn't that get picked up? It was a business podcast, so presumably its listeners weren't, were just like nodding along sagely. But you need to look after the 1% is a pretty wild opinion and quite an extreme opinion. So I feel like someone saying that, maybe we don't want to listen to about other stuff.
Also, chased out of the UK by taxation.
Yeah, it's just a very interesting, it's an interesting story about his life. Like he's someone who grew up, like me, he grew up in social housing for the first 10 years of his life. He was born in a council house. And then I think his family moved out of the area and presumably bought their home. But so he has benefited from the British state. He set up Ineos 40, got a bank loan, remortgaged his house, made all of this money. And then because he didn't like the amount of tax he had to pay, he was chased out of the country. Like, no one's chasing you out of the country. You're very welcome to be here. I also just think this fantasy of like, we live in this high tax, high immigration, high crime country, which is a sort of the triple threat of things he said, which is presumably why Nigel Farage was so keen to have lunch with him. Like taxation isn't that high. It's higher than the tax havens that you've moved to, but like, taxation in the UK isn't that much higher than other comparable countries. Like we need high taxes to have services to keep crime down. I just think it's like, it's a nonsense. He's a nonsense. It's like some old racist in the corner mouthing off because he's rich. We all have to listen to him and have like 2 days of media.
Like I don't listen to someone abusing me on the tube. I don't give them any weight. Why is this guy any different? He's just a guy. So my under the radar for the week is, it doesn't sound very sexy, but bear with me. There was a government consultation that just closed last week and there has been minimal coverage of it. I saw it covered a little bit in the Mirror, but this consultation was on the government's new settlement proposals. And although I have seen a lot of coverage, particularly late last year, particularly about the asylum element of the new settlement proposals the government have put forward, because as you may remember, there were some really flashy abhorrent headlines around kind of taking asylum seekers' jewelry as their kind of contribution to the state. And so a lot of conversation focused around that, understandably. But the actual proposals that they're putting forward are going to affect not just people claiming asylum, but also quite a large group of migrants who are already settled in the UK and have lived here for a long time. And care workers are particularly at risk.
So basically, people probably remember the Shabana Mahmood headlines about when she announced her migration and asylum reforms, and, you know, we learned that people are going to be like turned upside down for their jewelry. What you're saying is that this idea of earned settlement, so that you have to sort of earn a permanent right to be in the UK, that's not just going to apply to asylum seekers, it's going to apply to other migrants.
Yeah, it's going to apply to other migrants, and particularly health and social care workers are going to really bear the brunt of it. So at the moment, it's quite common in Europe as part of EU law that it should take you 5 years to be able to settle in a country that you've moved to. And with these proposals, they're going to increase that to at least 10. But for health and care workers, they're going to increase it to 15 years. And there are a lot...
Wait. If you work in health or social care, so if you work in the NHS, you're going to have to do it for 15 years to earn your settlement in the UK.
Yes.
When we have a huge hiring crisis in the NHS, and when pretty much anyone of any political stripe believes that working in the NHS or in social care is contributing to society.
Yes. And so these are people who...
Wow, that is wild.
Yeah. People who are caring for disabled children, people who are caring for elderly parents and grandparents, working very long hours. Yeah, these are people who are taking care of our grandparents, our parents, looking after disabled people, really valuable, important work that cares for some of the most important people in our lives, already for low pay, already in what can be quite a precarious situation, because often people are on a visa where they're tied to their employer, which means that they are also open to exploitation. How can you feel safe organizing in your workplace or trying to ask for better pay and conditions if you can be threatened with, I will fire you and you will be deported?
So wait, what is the government's rationale for saying that if you work in health and social care, is it about the sector? Is it about how much they're earning? Like, what is the so-called theory behind this?
That is a great question, because I don't get it. And there must be a driving force behind it. Care workers don't tend to earn very much. They earn between 20k, 25k per year, and contribute loads to British society in a sector that we're always told is understaffed. So why they would particularly go after this cohort of people, it isn't particularly clear. I mean, one reason might be that they're kind of conflating being tough on immigration with being tough on the route to citizenship, because people might not necessarily separate those two things out as being different. So trying to make it more difficult to move to the UK versus already being here and working, and trying to make it more difficult to be able to stay here and to earn more rights. The rhetoric around it might not necessarily be that clear for someone that isn't following the news in that way, or it doesn't relate to their work, or it doesn't affect them personally. So you can still be saying, you know, we're tough on migration, look at all these rules we're bringing in, and perhaps the message just feels tough. But it definitely feels like a self-inflicted wound from the government.
I think it comes back to a lot of even the asylum policies, that you're right, sounding like you're tough and like mean is sort of prioritized over actual, like, what the policy impact will be. Like all of the stuff that got headlines from Shabana Mahmood's announcements, there's very little evidence that in terms of the push and pull about where you choose to claim asylum, that people are reading Shabana Mahmood's like sort of blue sky and Twitter feed being like, how tough is it in the UK? Like, it's often much more about where you can get, where you have family, the language you speak. I guess that brings me to another point of like, is this also about the race of the people that tend to do these jobs? Like, I mean, I know my understanding with most immigration stuff is if you earn enough money or bring enough money to the UK, you can sort of bypass most of the systems. Like, I think earned settlement is like the number, it's not 15 years if you're bringing in the big bucks. If you're a banker, it's like you get a few years shaved off. So do you think this is also about, aside from, just like attacking working class people and people on low incomes, is it also about the people that are typically working in health and social care, like who are disproportionately Black and brown?
Absolutely. And who's considered to be a good migrant, the kind of migrant that we want, and who isn't. As you said, you can reduce the number of years that it takes if you earn over 50K or you earn over 125K. So you are favouring bankers over care workers. And that's also a value statement from the government that, for what's meant to be a progressive Labour government, doesn't really track. But there is the people who tend to do care work do tend to be, a lot of them are from former Commonwealth countries. They will be people of colour. And I absolutely think that will play a role. Whether they think this will make people leave the country, I think is misguided. What it is more likely to do is to cause an increase in the number of people who are going to become undocumented. And they might not even necessarily know that it's happened to them. Because it's very, very difficult to communicate changes of this scale to every person in the country who's going to be affected by it. No matter how many public facing campaigns you do, there are always going to be lots and lots of people who aren't necessarily going to be aware of the changes and what they need to do to keep their status over time.
So right now, we're going from a system where you could come to the UK, maybe get a job as a nurse or a care worker, you'd be here for 5 years, and then you could apply for presumably indefinite leave to remain. So you then have, you've been here for 5 years, you've got a job, you can stay here long term, you could, settle, you could have children. And now we're saying that will be so they're government consulting, so that will be at 15 years, you can then apply.
Yeah. And what people are really afraid of is that you're going to have lots of people who thought they only had 1 year left. So maybe your employer hasn't been treating you very well. You've been saving up and you're just got that 1 more year to do. And then you'll be able to settle and you'll be able to change job and you'll have much more security. And importantly, you will also be able to access public funds. So you might be able to get access to social security that might help you with raising children, for example. And you thought that was coming in 1 year.
You get a mad amount of time, especially if we're talking about people in skilled like health and social. So like you could have like qualified as a nurse, work for a few years in the country you're born in, come to the UK like 50, you come to the UK at like 25, 30. You're then like a big chunk of your working life if you spent it in a country that then, yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit of a sign of where, maybe it's a consultation opening, so maybe more coverage will come if it closes, but it's quite a big slap in the face. And especially given it's going to penalize people in the sector where we know we need more workers and where like paying conditions already aren't good. Yeah. Why do you think it hasn't been picked up more widely?
I think some of it is the technicality of the changes. There's so much in here. You've got different visas depending on the type of work you do. There are different rules depending on whether you're considered a skilled worker or you're a health and social care worker. There are lots of things around other rules that would, if you don't meet them, you can't apply at all. So if you don't have a certain level of English language, if you've not earned over about £12,500 a year, there's just so much in there. I think it's quite hard to communicate. It's not seen as necessarily an interesting story. It might be that now the consultation's closed and when the government starts deciding how they want to implement this and when, and I think people are expecting it to happen quite quickly, maybe we'll see more about it in the news. And I think we will see more and more campaigning on the issue as well. And so hopefully that will bring it to kind of the wider public's attention.
Okay, so the consultation is closed, but there is still a chance to lobby government.
There's still a chance to lobby government. Now's the time.
It's just, I just think it really underlines the sort of like the fantasy world that debates about immigration take place in now in the UK. We live in this reality of like the Jim Ratcliffes of the world who just got like vibes and no facts, like don't even live in the country, but they're telling us there's too many immigrants. It's like, you're literally not even here. You don't even go here. And then meanwhile, we've got actual government consultations going out that will undermine things that there is a consensus about. Like we want workers in the NHS, we want the NHS to run well. And it just feels, particularly galling it's a Labour government doing this. My under the radar for this week is William Blake House, which is a care home in Northants that is at risk of closure because it has a huge unpaid tax bill. So there's sort of two sides to the story. One side is the huge unpaid tax bill, which is the charity owes HMRC £1.6 million. And if you dig through the charity's accounts, pretty large sums have been transferred to the chair of the boards of the charity, who also has a company. So it looks a bit shady. But the other side of it is the families who have children that have severe disabilities, lots of them are nonverbal, who live in this care home, really like the service that they're receiving, really like the staff, and would like to try and take over the care home and run it themselves. They don't want to change anything. They just want to ensure that the home will still exist right now. In 7 weeks' time, if this tax bill isn't closed, the home's going to have to close. So it's a real kind of perfect storm of like bureaucracy and regulation getting in the way and huge amounts of money being shelled out, I would say, to the wrong people. And then, the people who need care and are vulnerable being at risk. You actually sent me the story, Kimberly. So why did you think it was good under the radar?
Yeah, I did send it to you. I thought it was a good under the radar because it kind of highlights some of the issues around our public services and who delivers them, as well as the kind of red tape that is around people who want to take over services and run them themselves for the benefit of their community and how difficult that is. Well, I used to be a local councillor and I'm a recovering local councillor. And one of the things you saw all the time were the people that work delivering these amazing services and also the people who then fall through the cracks when they're not being delivered well, the impact it has on them, because those are the people that were always kind of coming to our surgeries and kind of having really harrowing experiences. Trying to access services can be really cumbersome and confusing. And when it's difficult to access them and you fall through the cracks, it's some of the most vulnerable people in our society who suffer. When I was reading this story, you see that the service is actually being delivered really well. So the people who are working within the home are clearly doing an excellent job, to the point that these 18 families want to take it over because they want this service to continue. But I could hedge a guess that the money that was being made, the money that was going to, whether it's the dodgy chairman of the board, of which only two people being on a board as someone who's worked in the charity sector for a long time, very, very bad governance.
It's not actually compliant. Like, I don't think you can have a 2-person charity board. So, like, that's one of the many things the Charity Commission have missed.
Yeah. They definitely should have put more energy into this and less around their politically driven investigations into other charities. But I digress. It's the money, the profit isn't going to pay these amazing staff that are clearly going above and beyond to deliver this excellent service. It's going elsewhere. And when you commission out services, that's the risk with it, whether it's private equity getting involved in delivering our nurseries or delivering children's homes. Big profits are being made, but they're not being invested in the people that actually deliver the services and are, trying to do a great job. And when you read the article, the one place where I did see it covered in The Guardian, when they go to the service, to the charity delivering the service to kind of ask for their comment, they say, oh, well, it's because the local council wasn't giving us enough money that would then cover the agency fees to pay the staff. And it's true that councils' budgets have massively, massively reduced since the Tories came in 2010. And the budgets are tighter and tighter, and they are having to then give less and less to deliver statutory services. That is true. But when you read this story, that money was clearly going somewhere and it wasn't going to the right place. And so I think it's also a story about kind of the failures of the increased outsourcing of our public services and the urgent need to rethink them in the way they're delivered.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because like two things can be true. Social care and local authorities are massively underfunded, and like something pretty shady happened here. And it just feels like it's such a, so there are 18 families, I think, of the 22 residents who've banded together and they're like, we can do this, we can take it over. And like, as you know, from being a local councillor, as anyone listening knows from sort of trying to run something or like do something in your community, like that's a ton of work. They're like drawing up papers and setting up entities, and they're trying to keep these people who care for their loved ones employed. Meanwhile, there's this charity trustee who's got all of this money that's been transferred to a company they run. there's a sort of lack of oversight from the Charity Commission. And then there are all the various local authorities who probably will have an obligation to rehouse people, but who knows like what the care will be. And yeah, you're right. I think there's been a bit of pickup. One Guardian journalist, Patrick Butler, who's written about this a couple of times, it got picked up by Civil Society World, and the investigation did get like written about in the BBC. But I think it's, as you say, it's a story that tells a bigger story about the country we're living in. The best public services are made with the people who are using them in mind and not sort of done to people. And it just feels, this family have 7 weeks, maybe they'll get a stay of execution. There's also a world in which, this charity owns some land that's attached to the house. They've got planning permission for that land. So the board are now saying, we'll sell that land and that'll cover the tax bill. So there's also a world in which the same charity that looks sketchy AF gets to keep running this home. And then it's like, well, can we be sure that our loved ones are going to be safe? So yeah, it feels like one that local councillor or local MP should be taking up and trying to just cut through the noise and sort it out. But you're right, the wrong people are making money from our public services. Unfortunately, this isn't even like a Serco or a big company. It's just things set up badly. So great under the radar. Thanks for sending it to me and thanks for joining me. Been a brilliant guest. If you want to hear more from Kimberly, we will have a bonus episode for our Patreon subscribers. Go to patreon.com/over the top under the radar to hear more of Kimberly and I's conversation. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thanks so much for having me.
Where can people find you and your work?
You can find me on social media. So on Instagram. Kimberly McIntosh 5 on TikTok if you want to see those TikToks that Carys was talking about earlier, and Kimmy_McIntosh on Instagram. I share most of my stuff there.
We will link on the show notes. Thank you so much, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening.